So for the next lecture, I'm very pleased to introduce two scholars to whom I immediately apologize for mispronouncing their names. So Professors Montserrat Cachero-Vinuesa and Natalia Maillard-Álvarez, if that's almost right. Montserrat is assistant professor in economic history at the economics department in the University Pablo de Olavide in Seville. Her research field is 16th century trade, focusing on communities, merchant communities, historical network analysis, and the notion of trust, which we already met in the previous lecture. Montserrat is also a member of the project International Networks in the Spanish Book Market, where her colleague Natalia is a principal investigator. So since 2016, Natalia has been Ramón y Cajal Fellow at the same university, Pablo de Olavide. Her research focuses on two branches of book history, which is book trade networks on the one hand and reading habits on the other hand, both in the Iberian Atlantic. And this has resulted in several books already about the Spanish book market and its consumers. So together, Montserrat and Natalia will talk to us today about the international networks in the Hispanic book market, focusing on 16th century Seville.
Thank you very much. Our paper today is the preliminary results of an ongoing project that is included in our research project, International Book Trade Networks in the Hispanic Monarchy, from 1501 to 1648, a project funded by the Spanish government. In this project, we want to explore the settlement process of some European publishing firms, such as the Junti, the Portonari, Boyer, Plantin Moretus, in Spain and in the Hispanic America. Our final goal is to connect Europe and the Atlantic, and therefore to place the Iberian book history during the Golden Age in a global perspective. And as I said, what we present here are only preliminary results. Why Seville in this particular paper? Well, Seville was the biggest city of Castile and had a really vivid local market already in the 15th century. But from 1503, Seville became the gate to the Americas. And therefore, it was, during all the 16th century, and even in the 17th century, a bottleneck for the Atlantic businesses. Today, the data we present runs from 1549 to 1589, despite the title of the, we forgot to change the title of the presentation, sorry. This data, well, my colleague will explain you longer about the database. We focus on the second half of the 16th century because the first half was characterized by the domain, or the first half of the century was the domain of the Kronberger family. The Kronberger family, printers of German origins, they were granted with a privilege to export books to the Americas, especially to Mexico, to the New Spain, viceroyalty. Since 1550, we can see that the situation changed totally. First of all, we see a reinforcement of the inquisitorial control over book production and book distribution. At the same time, we see the end of the Kronbergers' monopoly. Therefore, the market, the American market, was open to everyone, at least to all the Spanish merchants, and it became more attractive to these international firms that finally could try to get into these Atlantic businesses. And now I'm giving the floor to my colleague, and she will explain you our database and our data.
Thank you. I'm Montserrat, by the way. What I'm going to explain is the process from which we have been transforming, analyzing the information. So departing from the original contracts at the archive, we are transforming contracts into a database. We have now 700 contracts and around 740 individuals in there, dividing information, personal information from business information, and then using some tables to link the information. And then transforming everything into graph by using a software, right? So, we got in the database, we have different kind of contracts, power of attorney, debt contracts are most common, so reinforcing the idea that credit was pretty important at this period, but we also have a different kind of contracts like debt collection, cessions, purchase, or this general power of attorney, etc., etc. And in the contracts we have information about, of course, books, but also other different printing materials such as, for instance, paper, leather, etc., together with the commodities such as textile, wine, olive oil, some of them to be exported to America. And this picture is showing you one important thing we need to take into account, that they are not exclusively working or trading with books, but also they were developing different trading activities. And according to that, regarding the profession, we'll find booksellers, book merchants, printers, apprentices, together with different profiles, such as merchants in general, but also artisans, lawyers, members of the Catholic Church, etc., etc. We are classifying individuals according to the way that they define themselves in the contracts. So, for instance, if a person defining like a book merchant, despite the fact that he is involved in the trade of many different commodities, and maybe books are not the major interest, but we are using this classification. And regarding number of contracts, so we can see a huge variability in here. We can see important book merchants like Andrea Peccioni, for instance. He's involved in more than 120 contracts. And then we have a different number of people, a number of contracts per people. But on average, more or less, it's like 4.5 contracts on average. So what we were expecting at the beginning, it was something like that in our imagination. So maybe that was a cluster representing different groups, maybe the Genoese cluster or the cluster from Lyon, etc. And they were contracting mostly among them, and then with connections with the other groups. That was our imaginary idea. But then what we got, it is that. So this was reality, the real market. So here, which is very similar to what she was presenting before, notes are individuals, and the ages are reflecting interaction in a contract. So we can see a group of individuals that used to act separately, just trading among them, no connection with the central core, and then we have this super big core. In the center, individuals that are more active in the market. The size of each node is representing the degree, in this case, the number of contracts in which they are appearing. And we have been recording 3,400 ages, resuming the whole interaction inside the network. So, as this information, I mean, it could be useful. Definitely, the picture is beautiful, but I would say more useful to know who is in there already. So I've been elaborating some rankings with some standard measures from social network analysis. The degree that it refers to the number of direct connections, in this case, the contracts. And betweenness and closeness refer to distances, so while closeness refer to individuals that are best placed in order to influence the network quickly in the diffusion of news. Betweenness refers to people bridging others, so people that are in the middle and at this regard, we can see in betweenness, for instance, control of collaboration, so a person is in the middle. While these three metrics refers to one node, The eigenvector, it is calculating not only the importance of a node itself, but regarding its connection. So it is like the first three columns referring the importance of one person, while the eigenvector, it is saying, so you are relevant depend on who is your friend. So if and looking at the results, it seems that we will find same names repeated. For instance, we have a winner, Andrea Pescioni, and then we will find also other important names like, for instance, Francisco de Aguilar or Diego Mejia that are present in most of the rankings. For this reason, we decide to run the ego networks to see specifically those winners who they were connected. And here we have some metrics, so we have been detecting 4 different groups according to their behavior in the market. So group number 1 is Lucret de Junta and Benito Boyer. Group number 2 will be Francisco Díaz and Juan de Medina. Group number 3, Alejo Herrera, Jacob Lopez, and the last one, Pescioni and Portunaris. And now, since there's something going wrong, and now what Natalia is going to present is if we can, is that the ego network of these different groups and trying to understand why we are grouping them together because of their behavior in the market, right?
You can just try to shut down the software updates.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, our first group is formed by Lucret de Junta and Benito Boyer, members of 2 very well-known families of these international European publishing firms. Lucret de Junta was the son of Bernardo de Junta, and he was established in Salamanca, while Benito Boyer was from Lyon and was established in Medina del Campo. They acted as what we have defined as delegated power, because they were not established in Seville, although this ego network refers to their contracts in Seville, where what they did is to connect with Seville and also with the America, mainly through a pool of non-fixed agents, among which Andrea Pescioni was the most important one. We'll speak about Pescioni later. Our second group is formed by 2 Sevillian booksellers, or book merchants really, Francisco Díaz and Juan de Medina, who were brothers-in-law, who were working in the Sevillian market before 1550. Indeed, they have a role in the end of the Kronberger's privilege to export books to the Americas. What is interesting and what is reflected in these ego networks is that they have very strong connections with the local markets. But in order to be supplied with European books, they also have to develop connections with the European publishing firms. And again, as you can see, Andrea Pescioni is, I know it's a little bit small, the notes, but as you can see, Andrea Pescioni is always the biggest notes in all the ego networks in these graphs. So, our third group is formed by Alejo Herrera and Jacob Lopez, who have this ego network, these star-shaped ego networks. These are 2 very interesting cases, different but very interesting. In the case of Alejo Herrera, he was an itinerant agent or itinerant book merchant, working between Medina del Campo and Seville since 1550, around 1550. What is interesting, we found very interesting in his case, is that he did not need to contract with these international firms, and especially he did not have a lot of contacts with Andrea Pescioni, probably because he didn't need them. He had his own resources in Medina del Campo in order to bring books to Seville. In the case of Hakama Lopez, although he's defined in the documents as a book merchant, what we found is that his main interests were not books. He traded with very different commodities. Through his marriage, he also was linked to a converso family in Seville, and he has important contacts also with the Americas, but as we said, he tried with every kind of commodities, and a lot of the nodes he's connected with are not book merchants or booksellers, but other kind of merchants. And finally, we have two truly international agents established in Seville around 1560, around the same time, both of them, but with very different results. The first one is a failing history, Pedro The Opportunities. He was a member of the Portonari family from Trino de Monferrato in Italy, but it was a family established at the end of the 15th century in Lyon, and from Lyon they extended their branches to Italy again and to Spain. Pedro was the brother of Andrea de Portonaris, who was established in Salamanca and who was the major book merchant and printer in Salamanca at this time. Andrea sent his younger brother, Pedro, to Seville in order to become his agent in the city of Seville, but also in the American market, where he already had very important interest. So he had the international links and the family links. He also married to a woman from a merchant family in Seville. And he has all the resources to success. But after 10 years working in Seville, he had to declare his bankruptcy and leave the city. We suspect that the problem was that he was involved, especially after his marriage, because during the first 4 years in Seville, he was acting mainly as his brother's agent and in his brother's behalf. But after his marriage, probably with part of the dowry he received, he started to invest in more different kind of commodity and different kind of businesses. Maybe it was the reason because he went in debt, or he had too many debts that he could not pay back. But the result, that is for sure, is that in 1570 he left the city for good. And the next news we have about him, it's from Salamanca a few years later, but with a very low profile. Nothing compared to what he has done in Seville before. And then we have Andrea Pescioni, that is the successful history. Andrea Pescioni has the biggest ego net within the book market during this period in Seville. And who is this person? Andrea Pescioni was from Florence, although he probably was trained in Lyon. In his first years in Castile, he was an agent of the Giunti family, but he was also Benito Boyer's frontline manager. So already when he arrived to Seville in the 1560s, he had all the international links he needed. At the same time, when he arrived to Seville, he managed to make very important connection both with the economic elite of the city and with the institutional elite, particularly with the Inquisition. One of the first things Andrea Pescioni did when he arrived to Seville was go to the Castile of the Inquisition in the city and declare how books were, declare about the smuggling of books to Seville, from La Rochelle to Seville, and which were the routes followed by some Protestant booksellers to try to smuggle books to Seville. At the same time, through his marriage, and especially through his, how to explain this, but he became the godfather of many prominent families, of the children of many prominent merchant families and elite families in Seville. So, through this policy, through this strategy, he built very strong personal networks. And he became, all these strong links became translated into his business his strength in the business market in Seville, but also in the America, when we know that he was very well known, a very well-known bookseller, and he provided many of the books that were sent in this time to the Americas. So our ongoing conclusions, because this is, as I said, is a preliminary result. What we want with this paper, with this project, is to escape from conventional ideas about group strategies. Especially we want to use network analysis to understand the differences between networks and groups, because we think that networks were more flexible than mutant than groups as a business structure. We found that book merchants in Seville did not decide about their business according to their nationality or to their profession. They trade with everyone every time they could. So we have Italians, we have French, we have Flemish, especially in a period, in a later period, but they were trading with everyone every time they could, as I said. So we found a very dynamic market in Seville. And as you can see there, individuals did not show any kind of exclusivity in the selection of their business partners, and we think that the historical network analysis can allow us to have a closer look into what the early modern market really was. Our next steps in this project will be, first of all, to finish our database, because we still have a lot of data to process for all the 16th century and part of the 17th century. And what we also want is to analyze the quantity of contracts, the quality of contracts, and the different types of contracts. Once we have done that in Seville, our idea is, once we have identified also the major agents in Seville, is to compare that with other markets outside the city, especially Salamanca, Medina del Campo in Spain, Mexico in America, and if it's possible also Lyon, Venice, and Antwerp, if we can. Thank you very much.